Hey, happy 2022 and welcome to the January E36 M3 update. My name's Eddie Mello, and this is the Car Habit Garage where we like to entertain you with information around the E36 M3. And today we're going to focus on the coupes and the sedans, and we're going to talk about all the crazy increase in prices over 2021. So we'll actually cover the 1 year pricing trend for both coupes and sedans. And then we'll work quickly to kind of show you some examples of what the highest priced cars were and what the lowest priced car was, and then what the average price car is. So I'll show you some examples that actually sold, and let's get into it right now. Once again, for the audience, I want you guys to remember this is for the United States market. Even though E36 generation was built between 92 and 1999, it was only available in the United States from 1995 through 99. And it did follow the E30 M3, which actually did not sell well. And we were lucky to get the E36 M3 since it is considered a commercial success. And we'll go move forward from there. So let's get right into this. So let's take a look at 21. So a big shout out to classic.com. They aggregate all the data from Bring a Trailer, Cars and Bids, P-Car Marketplace, and Collecting Cars. So in general, the US car market just in total went up 25%. So if you started the year, you saw 25% appreciation in resale prices in the United States used car market. And so how does that compare to the E36 M3 Coupe? Well, and I looked at manuals only on the E36. So you can see at the start of the year, the average price was 18,453, and by the end of December, it was significantly more than that. It was $25,586, which represents a 26% increase, or if you're just looking in pure dollars, almost $5,000 in appreciation from January to December. There were approximately 91 cars that were put out through the auctions, and 81 actually sold through. The lowest price example was $9,000, and the highest priced example was $57,000. So once again, the E36 M3 did slightly better than what the overall used car market, but you can tell that whether it's driven by COVID, supply chain, or whatever, that we experienced a giant upward movement in price. Now let's take a look at the next slide. So the next slide is kind of around the year. So we're looking at OBD1 cars, which were only produced in 1995 in the US, and then OBD2 cars, which were 96 through 99. So 95 cars sold with an average price of 24,655. And then you can see it was slightly lower. So 96, there wasn't enough data or sales, but it was pretty low at $16,625. But if you look at 99, the last model year you could buy an M3, it had the highest resale values at 27,134 on average. Now, let's not forget that there were about 35,000 M3s sold during that 95 to 99 period here in North America, and 10,220 coupes were sold in model year 1995 versus almost 12,000 sold between 96 to 99. So that's a lot of cars that came out in 95. And if most of you are following the E36 market, that's because 95 was really an extension and went into 96 as well. That kind of tells you some things. You also want to remember sometimes people want to chase OBD1 cars because of modability or changes that they didn't like in the 96 through 99. But I think you can mod both OBD1 or OBD2 cars. So let's take a look at some of the examples really quick here. So when I'm looking at the examples, this first one here is a $57,000, 24,000 mile, 1995 red M3. It's absolutely beautiful. It was actually a California car that was Euro delivered and had all the paperwork. I think it's had a total of 3 sellers in that time. You know, it sold on BAT in 2018 in October for 29,000. So 57,000 in roughly 3 years is a pretty big appreciation. Nice buy sell arbitrage there. But it has, styles, 22 wheels. Red's a great M3 color. But the thing I always was amazed at, this person had this car on the undercarriage dry as clean, and you could see in the picture there at the bottom, I mean, it looks brand new. And I know some of this is because the car is basically brand new with 20,000 miles, but this dry icing now out for undercarriage is truly amazing, and it's not cheap from what I understand. I heard the average BMW is somewhere around $2,000 to $3,000 to get dry ice, depending on where you live. So let's take a look at the lower example. So here is a 96 M3 coupe that was sold out of Canada. It had a lot of miles, 194,000 miles, but it was Boston green with Modena Napa leather. I'm not sure how good that color combination. I actually think this sold cheap. It had a little bit of rust. It looked a bit worn, but $9,000 for this example, actually, it looks like it might have got underbid. And I can't tell you, there's probably a myriad of reasons, but was the lowest price selling car out of all the auction sites last year for coupes. Now, let me show you what the average price sample. So the average price was around $26,000, right? And this is a beautiful Cosmos Black 1998 M3 with, the contour style 23 wheel, sunroof, Vader sports seats, gray leather. It had been registered in Florida, Georgia, and it had just 99,000 miles on it. So a 100,000 mile car, black, in what I would consider very good, set the average buyer back about $26,000. Then I want to share with you today on this next picture is this is the actual 1996 M3 coupe that I acquired in January of 2021, and I paid $17,500. Now this M3 was a Texas originated car, but lived most of its life in California by the coast. So it had a very little bit, mostly surface rust, but it did have one area around the windshield where there was rust that had to be fixed, and I did have that taken care of. It had about 119,000 miles. It was a factory wing, so there was no third brake light, but the sunroof didn't work. It was missing the motor. The power windows were intermittent, and it did not have AC because it was removed because this car was used as someone's weekend racer. But it did have an incredible suspension on it with TC Klein coilovers, and it was a great car for me to build the LS3 resto mod, since I knew I was going to end up repainting and doing an LS3 engine and transmission. So, but 17.5 gets you what I think was actually a pretty decent looking car, and it drove fantastic. It was in very good shape from that perspective. All right, so let's move on to the sedans. I got a lot of feedback on the last valuation report. People wanted to see the sedans. And so let's take a look at the moving average. So if you started the year in January of 21, the average price of an M3 was $14,475. So about $14,500. And then if you look at November 25th, the average price was around, it was significantly more, probably around almost $19,000. And so when you say that's over $4,000 or a 28% increase, so it's actually 2 percentage points greater than the coupes. And it actually had the highest resale. So a Techno Violet model, and I'll show you to you next, sold for $60,000, and the lowest was right around what the coupe was at $91,699. And if you're looking at this graph, it's really interesting. It was evenly distributed around cars over 20,000 and cars below 20,000. But the average was actually, around that 18,509 mark. So let's take a look at the model years. Obviously, there's only 2 model years for the United States, and that was 97 and 98. And you can see that 97 sold for on average about almost $19,000, and 98s went for $21,597 on average. And you can see the numbers respectively. Just curious, as far as quantity sold, there were 4,574 manual sedans that were sold in the US, and that was sourced from the website Beamer Tips. So if you're interested, take it that. But let's step on and actually look and see what $60,000 gets you. So look at this. It's a 98 M3 sedan, Techno Violet with gray Napa leather, 5-speed, the 17-inch wheels, had all the other advantages that you would want on the car. It was a standard package. It was first registered in California and spent time in a few other states. It had very good records on it. So radiator replaced, water pump, thermostat, all the normal things that you need to replace on an M3 were done, including they even rebuilt the steering rack. And so as you can see, 42,000 miles, and it was very well presented. And it sold for $60,000. That's a lot of money for this car, and it's probably a new record since it's not a lightweight. Let's take a look at a $9,000 example. This was on Cars and Bids, and this was, silver, which I think was one of the most readily available colors. Also, one of the colors that fades quite a bit over time. It had the sports seats, an automatic air conditioning, the HK sound system. The car was modified. It had coilovers, super sprint exhaust, a Dynon intake that was actually legal, carb legal, because the car was a California car. But the engine had been replaced, and it had 109,000 miles on the chassis as well. I think if you weren't afraid of the engine replacement, this car probably went cheap again at $9,000. But the presentation for some of these auctions, this one you could actually see dirt on the floor mats, and so I'm not sure that the seller really got the most out of this car. But that's what the low example was for 2021. Now let's take a look at the average price example. I picked one around $18,000. It's another Arctic Silver with Napa leather gray. All the same thing: sunroof, traction control, remote CD changer. This car actually, replaced touch the flywheel, throughout bearing, and it only had 86,000 miles, but it was a Minnesota car. And so I'm not sure, some of the northern extreme cars, people, get worried about rust, but it was about the average price. It looked really like a nice clean car at $18,000. And then on this next slide is actually my 1997 M3 sedan that I owned brand new. I leased this car back in 97, and actually sold it to a friend of mine. I flipped the lease, and I made a few bucks. It wasn't much money, but he actually got an incredible deal by buying out my lease. And it was Arctic Silver with the premium package, so it had the wood grain, handles and things of that nature. I'm not so sure that looks good now, but back then it was in vogue. But this is what started my love for the M3s. And with that, folks, that is our valuation guide. Hopefully you took away some good tidbit here. Once again, big shout out to the classic.com guys. Go ahead, check them out, www.classic.com. They aggregate all the data. You can set alerts. As always, on any car, you should get a pre-purchase inspection. It's a couple $100 usually, and it's just cheap insurance on before you take something home. Find the mistakes. There's lots of E36 M3 buying guides, as you can see on the screen right now, and let's look forward to see what 2022, and if we get another 26% of appreciation. If you like what you heard today, or if you have ideas for other valuation guides that you'd like, please hit subscribe and or leave us feedback at Car Habit Garage. And have a fantastic day. Thanks.